All right, welcome back to Call Time with Katie Birnbaum. I am so thrilled to be back doing my show, and thank you so much for all of the great responses to the episode last week with Catherine Gallagher. I'm just over the moon, and I am so excited for my incredible guest today. What a huge get, one of the best actors and singers and overall people in the world, Christian Borle. Welcome.
Hello, my friend.
How are you? How are you feeling today?
Well, after that introduction, much better.
Good. Well, this is obviously airing next week, but I would be remiss not to mention that today is the 1-year anniversary of Broadway and theater going dark, which feels both poetic and sad for us to be having this discussion. So how are you feeling about that right now?
March 12th, the day that shall live in infamy.
Curse.
I feel good. I feel optimistic. You know, not only it's spring, which obviously helps. And I think we know how to deal with spring a lot better this year than we did last year. And there were so many unknowns and so much uncertainty and worry, and there's so much fear in the air as it dawned on us what this really was.
What was it like? Did you do a show on this night?
We did. It's so funny. Well, not funny, but of note, perhaps, that the night before the 11th, which was a Wednesday night, I think, it was really when it started to hit all of us reading the articles. I remember there was an op-ed in the Times, and we were sitting in the dressing room, and I was sitting next to Gideon Glick, and the show hadn't been called. And the op-ed in the Times basically said, in the absence of leadership, we need to be our own leaders, and we need to stand up and make responsible choices and lead the charge. And we started a discussion in the dressing room basically saying, like, what are we doing here? Like, we need to go. Like, it is not safe to be here. It's not safe for the audience. It's not safe for us. And really, you know, we were just lucky that Little Shop of Horrors troupe was lucky that nobody had it and that we didn't spread it around. We just as easily could have. But we were voted down. We had a really long discussion right up until curtain, basically. And they were like, they're here. The audience is here and buzzing, and like, we can't like let them down. And I was like, let them down. But be that as it may, the show went on that night. And then the next day, the 12th, we were doing a put-in for Jeremy Jordan. And there was this energy in the air. And, you know, at that time, we thought it was just going to be a couple of weeks.
Thankfully, it was the only thing in the air.
Well done. We got through Act 1. And then, you know, the mandate came down. We heard that Broadway was shutting down. And,
wow.
You know, packed up the dressing room for 2 weeks or so, we thought, and here we are now. But there's, you know, hope is in the air, and there's momentum with the vaccine, which is incredible. And after what Biden said last night about everyone being eligible, hopefully by May 1st, it feels like, you know, we could get back sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it feels like the sun is peeking out from the clouds. And as you said, I think there's real momentum, both like generally with the vaccine and the world opening up, and with theater. I think it looks like hope is on the horizon, but we'll see. We're going to get into all of that. But first, I should give a bit of an introduction. I think most of our viewers are familiar with you. They should if they are not, but I should give a little background.
It's all right. We're all busy. We have our hobbies.
Yeah. They're knitting and stuff and baking bread instead of learning about the great Christian Borle.
It's fun.
So he mentioned, of course, that the last show that he would be doing if the world were not on fire was Little Shop of Horrors, but incredible actor, graduated from Carnegie Mellon, made his Broadway debut in the stage adaptation of Footloose. We're going to come back
there's a weird discrepancy, not that anyone should really care about such things, but I actually made my Broadway debut with Jesus Christ Superstar, the revival in the year 2000.
That's so funny. It's on Wikipedia. I guess I'm a bad journalist.
That's just Wikipedia for you.
It lists Jesus Christ Superstar after that. I even have that later in the timeline.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? No, I actually did the tour of Footloose in '99, and then I did Jesus Christ Superstar April of 2000, and then replaced Tom Plotkin in Footloose after that. I left Jesus Christ Superstar to do Footloose, and 1 week in, they got their notice. So my first great business decision.
Sorry for that discrepancy. And after that, went on, I said, to do Jesus Christ Superstar, Thoroughly Modern Millie, and then Spamalot and Legally Blonde to much acclaim. He's won not one, but 2 Tony Awards, first for the portrayal of Black Stash and Peter and the Starcatcher, and then for William Shakespeare in Something Rotten. You played Marvin in the acclaimed recent Broadway revival of Falsettos, which was one of my favorite things I've seen in the past 5 years, 6 years.
You can say 10. Come on, we're all 10 friends
years.
here.
10
Thank
years.
you. Thank you.
And if all that weren't enough, he of course played Tom Levitt in the iconic NBC TV show Smash, and would be doing Little Shop of Horrors, as I said. And I mean, those are only the highlights, but you clearly have this illustrious, insane career. It's incredible.
Happily, I feel very lucky.
Yes, I was gonna say, it must feel weird to hear your career, just sort of the highlights of your career, just sort of like read out very quickly for you, especially as we've had this like weird year of forced unemployment. Has it made you think of your career in any kind of different light, or is it just a matter of like, God, I wish I could get back to it, and feeling so grateful for the time that you got to work?
I certainly feel older. Like we all aged a little bit more than we would have over this past year. And so I'm looking back a little bit, having moved here. And also it's very sweet. I've had the opportunity this past year to get on Zoom and talk to students a little bit and, do some like audition coaching. And so telling students,
I would have killed for you as an audition coach when I was young. So
I have like 4 notes that I just give to everyone. They're not that great.
It's just raise the stakes every time.
Actually lower them. I'm trying to get them to ignore their instincts.
Love it.
We just watched Waiting for Guffman and it holds up. No, but like in talking to students and kind of filling in the younger generation, just saying that I moved to New York in 1995, it just feels like a lifetime ago. And the other piece of it is like hearing, highlights rattled off like that. It makes me feel I get such a wash of warm, happy feelings, because all of those shows were joys. And I still have so much family that I carry with me from those shows. But it's a reminder too of, when the March 12th happened last year, and now here we are. And as things gear up again, I do feel like there will be a new sense of, I don't think we're going to take these things for granted anymore. I defy anyone to complain about an 8-show week moving forward. I just think something's about to change, because we never thought that the rug would get pulled out from under us in this way. Like we always thought theater was just going to be this stalwart institution that was untouchable. And I was so like proud of that has been my home base for decades now. And to suddenly be without it, it's, a devastating loss. And so when we get back, I think it's going to have this whole new energy. Jonathan Groff sent me a little phone video of our backstage ritual during the prologue and Little Shop of Horrors at the beginning of the show that we would do together. On his last show, someone taped it, and it's just nonsense. It's ridiculousness, and we're just like joking around. Why we love theater is because we have these little rituals that we do every night. And it was so sweet how just like we had no idea what was coming. And there was like an innocence to it, which is beautiful. But like we will, I think, moving forward, savor those moments even more. And I can't imagine what that first bow is going to feel like when everyone gets back. Even seeing that article in the Post about touring productions possibly coming back in the fall, I'm thinking of my dear friend Kevin, who's will head out again on My Fair Lady. What it's going to be like to take theater back out to all those regional theaters and those big houses, and when it's safe again, it's going to be, I think, cathartic for us all.
Yeah.
A national, international, global catharsis.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the energy is just going to be electric, and the trick will be not going back to taking it for granted again. As you said, like, I feel like it'll be so easy to again start being like, oh, 2-show day, can't believe this, but never again, hopefully. We'll hold
Never
each
again.
other to it. So you mentioned moving to New York in 1995, you said? I'm curious, what was that transition like for you from college to a career, and was there a lot of sort of pounding the pavement, or did you find success pretty quickly?
No, it was, it's so funny because it was truly a different time. I moved here with a bunch of college buddies, so it was really nice to have a foundation. And I moved in with a couple of college buddies behind Lincoln Center. We converted a 2-bedroom into a 3-bedroom by putting up a very thin wall, and my closet was a rod hanging from the ceiling, so all my clothes hung over my bed. And I still remember the number of the call-in service, because we didn't have cell phones, obviously. So 212-946-1087 was my service number that people could call if they had like a business message, and you would call from a payphone, and if it rang, you didn't have a message, and if it picked up, then you spent your quarter and listened to your message. Yeah. So that's how we did
ringing.
Yeah, but it was like, it was, you know, because that's what I knew, I found it to be a much more charming era than the one that we live in now, with, you know, constant accessibility and no privacy whatsoever. We can get into all that later, but
I know it's one of your favorite topics.
It's just the end of the world. I think my case has been proven for me in the last several years. But anyway, and it was really, you know, New York was transforming. Disney, the Disneyfication of Times Square and 42nd Street was in full swing. And so we were kind of just on the other side of what people think of as like 42nd Street in the 80s.
Right.
And it was a really romantic, exciting time. It was a lot of auditions for like the European productions of Starlight Express and Cats, and, you know, improvising 4 counts of 8 of Fosse for the tour of Fosse, which is not something that I do well. I didn't get it. And then just eventually you start kind of making inroads with casting directors, and, you know, you work hard, and then little jobs started happening, and you know, it was 5 years before Jesus Christ Superstar happened, and that was just a lot of pounding the pavement and touring, you know, paying your dues, that type of thing.
Absolutely.
Also, this was before like reality television, really, and before instant stardom, so there was no sense. We didn't know anything but just working hard, slowly playing the long game. There was no like, well, I'm going to audition for this thing and become a star overnight and then use that stardom to parlay.
Right. There was no shortcut.
Correct.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I think about that time in your life / career, I think about a story, a thing that we bonded over very quickly, which was our love of the 1992 Broadway revival of Guys and Dolls. And you told me a story that I always think about it, and I'd love for you to share now for our viewers.
My college buddies and I came to New York for our first like big New York trip, and we had we planned on seeing Fantastics downtown, Cats at the Winter Garden, and Guys and Dolls, which was at the Martin Beck at the time.
Yeah.
Which is now the Hirschfeld, I believe. Is that right? On 45th? I think so.
Check it out. Let me get my fact checker over there. Oh, no, it's just me.
And we were obsessed with this behind the scenes making of the cast album of the Guys and Dolls album.
Same.
And we watched it on video, on VHS, and we were obsessed with the music director. And he, at the time, there was a skit on Saturday Night Live called Toonces the Driving Cat, and there was a real cat with fake puppet arms that would grab the steering wheel. And in this video, this music director conducted like toonces, and he was very sweet and was very enthusiastic and had this big, bright, open face. And we were just obsessed with him. So we saw, I think, a matinee of Fantastics downtown, and then we came uptown and we had a reservation at Sam's Restaurant, which was on 45th, I think. It's no longer there. And we walked in, and there, sitting at a two-top in between shows, was this incredible music director. And so we kind of were like a little starstruck. And the four of us got up at one point from our Cokes and our like pasta, and we walked up to him and just said, "Are you the musical director of Guys and Dolls?" And he like looked up at these four college students who like were starstruck, and his whole face brightened. He was like, "Yes." We're like, "We're coming to see the show tonight." He's like, "Where are you sitting?" And we're like, "We're in standing room." And so we got there, and he came out, and the lights dimmed, and he stepped up out of the podium, out of the pit, and he peeked up like Toonces over the railing, and he looked back at us, and he waved at us with his little Toonces arm, and we waved back at him. And then of course the show happened, and it was incredible, and we loved every second of it because it was a perfect revival. And then when he took his curtain call, he took a bow, and then he waved at us again, and it was just so magical and so sweet. It was a magical New York moment.
I'm obsessed with that story because, it's one of those examples of like, not a lot of people come up to the musical director of Guys and Dolls and recognize him. And so it's just, and it's not about recognition, but so fun that you guys were excited about that aspect of it in particular too. And I mean, that show, it's a perfect revival, as you said, and I'm obsessed with the recording. And I think it makes sense to me that you identified with it, because I definitely think of you as like a comedy guy. And when I was thinking about your career, I feel like there are sort of two threads to the Christian Borle career, which I'm curious if you share the same view. There's like leading man Christian, which is sort of like Emmett, Legally Blonde Christian. And then there's funny man character actor Christian, which is sort of like Black Stash, Little Shop. And I'm wondering if you think of those two things differently, approach them differently, or everything just comes from like the character.
Yeah, I haven't gone into any of those different projects with like a different mindset.
Yeah.
Like a different way to work. I think it's just, no, I don't separate them in my head. It's just they require like a different set of skills and tools.
Different muscles.
Yeah.
Would you say that you love that comedy is what you like gravitate towards at the end of the day?
I mean, yes, because it's fun. But I think over the course of the years, the ever increasing years, the joy of either aspect is when you can do the least amount of work to get the result that you're looking for. And I don't mean that in a lazy way. I just mean that in terms of the times that I feel that I have had to work the hardest was when I was doing material that required a lot of work and massaging I felt at the time, to get it to land. And the better the material, the more effortless you can be.
Yeah.
So like in Falsettos, for example, I've loved that material for so long, and I think it's perfect that it didn't require a lot of work. You just kind of know it and show up, and I luckily had Andrew Reynolds to play off of, and Stephanie J. Block and Brandon and sweet little Anthony. And so you just had to show up and not blow it,
Right.
But then there's other stuff that I've done, and I'm not going to like harp on it specifically, but that I've obviously had to sweat a little bit more.
Yeah. I think you're so aware of the text and letting the text lead you, as you were saying. And it makes me think of something that I didn't mention in the highlights of your career that I wish I had seen, was when you played Pryor in Angels in America. I feel like, I think people think of you as funny guy, but then you did Falsettos, which of course super funny, but also super serious, and Angels in America, which is perhaps the most dramatic piece of theater we have in modern dramaturgy. And what was that like? Was it super different, and was it a lot of work because of that?
I felt very lucky. I remember working very hard on that audition for Michael Greif and being very surprised that I got it. And I felt a little out of my league in a way. It's daunting material. And I think I felt the weight of it because it was the first real revival of it since that production, that everyone who saw it, it's just burned in their brain because of what it was, the event that it was, and those actors. And so in my inexperience, I think I let myself get, I've talked about this before, but I just like got really skinny and made myself sick just to kind of like try to,
method acting vibes.
Yeah. And I think I did myself a real disservice because I made myself a little miserable and kind of wallowed in like the sadness of it. I think, look, if I had had a little bit more experience, I would have taken it a little bit more lightly. I also have never considered myself the type of actor that just has like a bottomless emotional well that I can access in the blink of an eye. And the amount of crying in that role, I think I went through the script once and there are only 2 scenes in the entire show that don't say Pryor stop crying, or in the stage directions Pryor weeps or cries. You know what I mean? And so for like an outside in actor, which I've always considered myself to be, and I'm not, I say that with pride, they're all different types of actors.
Can you expand on what that means to people who may not know?
There are people who I do more of like a broad sketch of a character on the outside and kind of like think about what they sound like, look like, feel like. And then over time, the details fill in, as opposed to starting small and not putting any performance on and trying, finding the inner life first and then just kind of like building out from there. In school CMU was great because it didn't have like one specific acting technique that they pounded into you. The teachers had all different types of acting philosophies and you just kind of like picked and chose what felt right. Yeah. And so what I came out of school with was this amalgam of techniques. And it was more outside in. And so kind of, starting work on that was just really, perhaps it's fair to say that it was more of a challenge for me given my technique and strengths as an actor.
It's amazing to think that you did that in this amazing production. Not many people, I think, can play both Pryor and Shakespeare in Something Rotten. I think it's cool that you approach that there's no separation in your head, that they're still both roles. Because I think a lot of people who come not from musical theater, for example, think of musical theater roles as being like silly or approach it differently than they would a Pryor Walter. Do you approach them in the same way? And do you think musical theater takes a different muscle? Obviously, because of singing and dancing.
Right. Mostly the quads. No, that's the thing I was just thinking, and this is not going to come out in a fully formed thought, but as a theater lover, as someone who loves to watch theater, I think there's always a piece of me that's on the outside of things, kind of thinking about, and we should talk about too, how we met and how our
Don't worry, we're going to get there.
But I've always had like a little bit of an outside director's brain in
Mm,
terms of like when I watch theater, I know, even if I don't know technically what it is I like or don't like about a specific piece of theater or a specific moment, I kind of feel when I'm working as an actor that I have some kind of understanding about what the experience should be or what I want the experience to
right.
be.
Bigger picture.
And so I think maybe I had less control over that with Pryor, which is why I tend to be a little self-deprecating about it, because it was also early in my career where I didn't have as much of a handle on what I wanted to do or be or how this whole scene worked. And
Mm,
I was a little bit more at the mercy of the currents rather than being confident enough to like stake my claim on it and, you know, have ownership over it. But now, yeah, between doing a straight play or doing a musical, I know what I want to see in
mm,
either. And it's that kind of like, you know, it's the cliche about like, you know, you should take comedy very, very seriously and you should treat, you know, dramas with a light comedic touch so that the audience doesn't just get bored as hell or swept away by the cheesiness of musicals.
totally.
But it's yeah, that was rambling.
No, not at all. But it's a perfect transition to what I was going to ask next, which was how we met. We met because you began directing for the first time in 2018. You directed a two-hander play, Popcorn Falls, that our friend Jim Hindman wrote. And then the year after, you directed a production of Footloose at the Muni. And so I'm curious, how did that feel crazy for you, that transition from actor to director? And do you think now that you've done a project as an actor since you've directed, do you think that it's fed your acting at all or gave you a better sense of the full picture, as you say? Do you like directing also?
Yes, very much. I loved it. And I loved working with you. We had so much fun. It
We
was
did have
really,
fun.
really exciting. And you know, because it was my pal Jim, Jim and I met doing Mary Poppins. Um, we were both performing in that, and we started talking about writing, and he started writing this piece and just kind of came to me, I think initially with an eye towards maybe acting in it, but I was more interested in it just dramaturgically actually. And so I
Right.
kind of became his de facto dramaturg on that. And then when it came time to kind of like put it up, he and his friend Tom Serrata had just been throwing it up in their apartments, you know, and they wanted to do a reading of it. And they really sketched out a lot of the kind of vocabulary because it's a two-hander. It's these two guys that play many different parts. And so they're constantly transforming. And what they wanted to do was do it all in plain sight and have it just be grabbing props, you know, the old canard of picking up a prop and making a feather boa
A cat
a
in that
cat.
case.
Yeah. Um, and they had already come up with a lot. They'd had fun coming up with a lot of business, but they needed just someone on the outside to kind of like help shape it and clarify it. And so we started doing that. And then lo and behold, a couple of years later, it ended up being at the Davenport Theater. And it was a really fun transition because Jim and I were friends and he trusted me and he was sweet enough to step back from the acting part of it so that we could have that writer director relationship and sit on the outside and try to crack it. And the nicest part was when previews started and like we'd work all day and then I'd never had the experience of like having a preview performance and then just like sitting there without sweaty palms and looking at it from a technical point of view and not having to have all that performance energy because my performance energy, I'm nervous performing like a good 6 months into a show. So like even with a little shop, we were about 6 months in, I would still get sweaty
You
palms and
still
still get
get nervous?
nervous. Yeah,
Wow.
until it really settles in. Like 2 years later, I'm not nervous anymore, but like, yeah. And so it was a treat to like sit down and to have you with your notepad and just, you know, whisper notes and then it's over and then the work begins the next day. So taking the nerves out of it was a real surprising gift. And then the same thing with the Muni. You know, we went from this two-hander at the Davenport to the Muni, which is 11,000 seats or something like that, and a cast ultimately with like kids and locals and teens of 75 people. It was quite a different operation.
Yes.
And we threw that up in like 10 days.
Right.
And so if it weren't for Matt Kunkel, who was the associate on that, who scheduled everything and planned everything to within an inch of its life, I wouldn't know what I was doing. But same thing, like get there and then sit in an audience of 10,000 people and watch all these glorious people do the show, and then just have to like take notes. It's so fantastic.
It's funny you say that. When I first started doing some directing too, I also, because I had just started becoming a professional actor like a year before or 2 years before, and in college the preview schedule is not the same. Like you're doing classes and then you like do your show or whatever. So I was very struck when I started acting professionally by how draining the previews schedule is. It's the worst, I don't want to use the word worst, but it's the most tiring part of a contract, in my opinion, as an actor. And so to, as you say, sit back and, I mean, it's still work, of course, but just simply the sheer exhaustion of like having probably run the show once and done various scenes during the day and then coming back and having to do it for an audience is a crazy thing that I think not a lot of audience members also think of when they're seeing previews. But it's also the most, sorry, you were going to say something.
Continue.
I also think it's having done it now from as an actor and a director, and correct me if I'm wrong, I also find it to be the most magical part of the rehearsal process in some ways, because that's when you really see like, do we have a show or not?
It's also like that sweet moment where you get out of the rehearsal room and then suddenly the division happens between the team and the actors and the crew backstage, because up until then you're all in it together and the lines are blurry. But then the very necessary thing happens, you know, it's like a kid moving out of the house, is that, you know, the actors go to the dressing rooms and they can finally kibitz together about everything. And then we're on the outside.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And vice versa. But it strikes me too that one of the, I think, helpful things about having been an actor first and then directed is knowing as an actor how exhausting it can be to just be at someone's beck and call, because you can be rehearsing something and be exhausted, and then all the director has to say is like, all right, let's do that exhausting scene again. And having no control over that is a challenge. But being on the other side of it, and my kind of goal starting off and moving into Footloose was to just not over rehearse things that seemed to be going well, because it's time that makes things better. I think, not drilling necessarily. I mean, some things obviously you have to drill, like if you're doing like a big musical number, or like, you know, but, and just giving people time and letting them conserve their energy is more useful to me than like saying, okay, again, okay, let's do it again. Let's go back and do that whole section again. I think that lowers morale, and I think it's like diminishing returns at some point. Yeah.
Was it nice for you to suddenly have this, like, for lack of a better word, power or agency once you started directing? Because as you say, as an actor, you have power over your performance, which is obviously an amazing feeling, but you are at the whims and mercy of the team telling you got to do it again, you got to do it this way, you got to do XYZ. So was it wild for you to suddenly have the all power of the director?
Yeah. I feel like I was pretty responsible with it the times that I've been able to do it. The opposite of that actor conundrum is that then once performances start and you're standing on stage in front of an audience, then you have all the power. And that's the sweet gift after all of that, is that you are standing there and truly, like at the end of the day, the only thing stopping you from doing whatever you want is your own sense of ethics, morality, the direction, your coworkers, but you could do whatever you want to do.
Truly. I was just talking about Call of the Void the other day. You know that phrase?
Mm-mm.
It's the sensation of feeling like, oh, I could like walk into a completely silent room and scream kind of thing. And I feel that often as an actor, like knowing that I could walk on stage and do something crazy that I'm not supposed to do at any time.
There was a moment in Spamalot that, well, there were many moments in Spamalot that I'll never forget, but there was a bit with Hank Azaria playing the French taunter up on the castle, and I was his little French sidekick. And we went through a phase well into the run where he would start to improvise. And it was one of those magical things of like, and everyone was enjoying the show. We were enjoying doing it. The audience was enjoying it. It met with great success. And, you know, when you have Hank Azaria and he feels like going on a bit of a riff, you let him go on a bit of a riff. It didn't last very long just because of like, you know, these things never do and actors have to be reined in, and I get that part of it. So it was gorgeous when it lasted. But he used to do this thing where he would, I think Philippe was my character's name or something, I don't know, or that's the horse from Tangled, but he would call my name and he would say, you've made, he'd call down to the knights and he'd say, you've made Philippe crazy. He's acting like, and then fill in the blank. And he would like throw something at me and I would have to like stand up and basically be his puppet. And it had this energy to it. Like everyone backstage would be wondering what he was going to do. And everyone in the audience could feel that this had gone off the rails on some level, you know? And those are like magical moments that cannot last.
Yeah. Well, it is that. I mean, that's the beauty and the joy of live theater. And I was going to ask you, because you've done a fair amount of television as well, whether that is different for you and whether you feel that your home and your heart will always be with the theater. You can say
Always.
no.
No, always. Always. TV is just a totally different beast. Smash was special. And it felt like a cocoon, and it was a bunch of theater people who understood, I think, what that energy is. And you know, it's that adage of TV, you know, you get paid to wait, is true. Like it's really, I just yesterday went and worked on a really, really lovely set, and I was there for 7 hours for 3 lines. And it's just, you know, spend
Wow.
the first 3.5 hours, you know, watching YouTube videos and reading my book and having like a light chicken lunch and a really heavy cream sauce with very soggy spinach. And then as that's digesting, you're suddenly called to work. So you have this like burst of like 15 minutes, the swirl of energy. And especially now too, like they come and they take your mask and like a little clamshell plastic thing. And then you like stand there and people brush your face with things. And then, so you have like 5 minutes of actual like acting work. And, you know, I wasn't doing anything monumental. It was exposition yesterday. And then you go and you sit for another hour and a half and fall asleep. And then like they knock on your door, like, okay, they're ready. Like, oh, okay, all right, okay. And it's so the opposite of like that charge of the hard work, the different type of hard work of rehearsing for 4 hours straight, grabbing a light meal, heading back, getting in the makeup, getting the nerves, having the very structured calls. You know you're going on at 8:04. If only we'd get it down to 8:01, but you can't. You know what I mean? All that glorious stuff.
Of course.
But it's the people yesterday are ultimate collaborators. It's really sweet. Like it's a different type of family. You're more family with like the crew than you are with the cast, because there are people on the show that I've never met.
Right.
And it's especially at this particular time to have been able to do a little bit of work. I feel very, very lucky. So I certainly don't mean to disparage it, but it's just totally different. You know what I mean? And
Totally
it's different acting muscles, and like it's that cliche of like everything's got to come down to here. It's not necessarily where I live.
Always whispering. My first on camera class, I was like, wait, but that's whispering, and they were like, yeah.
I auditioned once for a movie that my friend Patrick Wilson was going to be starring in, and I was auditioning for his sidekick, and he was very sweet to come in and do my audition video with me. And I hadn't had a lot of on-camera experience, and he had at that point already.
Right.
And we got in there in the office of our agent's office, and someone was on the camera, and we started, and I was like acting the scene, and then he would be like, yeah, and then I'd be like, but I don't know if I have the other thing. And then he'd go like, oh no, it's just like, oh, that's what and I'd be like, all right then. Oh, and cut. How was that? Great. I didn't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a stereotype of like the theater actor, and especially the musical theater actor, who's like a little bit much and like always on and like walks into the room and stuff and commands the room, which I think you and I are both people who don't love that personality. But I do think there is something to be said about
I can enjoy that personality. I think when I get a little, what's the word I'm looking for? I like people who are self-aware. So when people know that they're bringing that energy, I find it incredibly charming.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. And it's part of the joy and part of the community. As you were saying, as we're talking, I miss so much the different energies of the being in the room, in the rehearsal room, what that energy is like, the being in the show, doing the show, what that energy is like, and how it is all ultimately having fun with your friends, which what better job is there in the world?
Yeah, it's why it is the professional version of running around the high school hallways after hours. It's just that.
And I think that people who, especially from doing this show and talking to so many people, it's very clear that people who, anyone who is successful in theater at the end of the day just like sees it as running through the halls, as you said. It's just pure joy and fun, but you also have to work very hard, of course.
And mind your own business.
Yes. Oh, I didn't have anything prepared, but I should ask you, do you want to get on your soapbox about social media and privacy and all that? And how
I always do. Thanks. No, that's all. I don't need to get on my soapbox. I just wish people would consider, especially young actors. Let's talk about it from an industry point of view.
Sure.
I wish young actors would consider what it would be like to not be on social media, and kind of explore the great lie that's been told that like your followers dictate the jobs that you get. I get that people would want their actors to have more followers because that helps with the marketing department, but that's what the marketing department is for, I like to say. But I think, if you're great, and you go in and audition, you're going to get the job.
Yeah, I guess as a follow-up to that, I very much think of you as an actor's actor, which is so great to talk to an actor's actor. And so do you have any advice as someone with the longevity of a career you've had for people wanting to be actors or even wanting to be directors? What's your advice?
Yeah, don't seek out celebrity.
Yeah, I think that's good advice.
Maintain a little privacy. Yeah.
Especially, I mean, I think TV and film is a different beast in that way, and you're sort of unique because I think you're at the upper end of like theater fame, but I think it is still great to be able to like walk out of your show with a baseball cap and like go about your life.
And also, if you don't seek that particular type of attention, then I think you're more allowed to just kind of take your time. And if you're allowed your privacy if you set proper boundaries.
Yeah, agreed.
You should be anyway.
You should be, for sure. So to end, I always end with a segment that I call the Thank You 5 segment. And it's just a cutesy name. It doesn't relate to
it's adorable
process, but it's 5 rapid fire questions. So you just have to answer the first thing that comes to your head when I ask.
All right.
You can, I suppose, to be clear to my viewers, I have not cleared these questions with Christian. So you can say I don't want to answer if you don't want to, but I think they're
great.
fun.
Okay.
All right, let's do it. Broadway dream role you've yet to play.
Oh my goodness gracious. I mean, the cliche is Sweeney Todd, so we'll just say Sweeney Todd. Why not?
You'd be fantastic.
It would be Pingy. I don't know what it would be. It would be different. It would be different. I don't know if that would be a good thing or a bad thing.
Oh my God, I think it'd be great. And Pingy.
Yeah.
This is the one that I was like, you may not want to answer this, but Team Ivy or Team Karen?
I can't answer that.
I could do a whole separate show just on Smash, which I've never quite mentioned to you to maintain our friendship because it was really creepy. I mean, it came out my senior year of high school and it was like, let me get this in an IV. But
so to speak.
Exactly. I won't reveal which team I was on either. If you could go back in time tonight and play one of the characters you've played in your career, any one of the characters you've played in your career for just one night tonight, it was completely safe, COVID procedures, what would you do?
I think just for the giggles of it, it would be a toss-up between Shakespeare and all the Spamalot characters.
Love it. Yeah, we need that joy. On a similar note, funniest co-star you ever had?
I can't answer that because I have been lucky enough to have had so many hilarious co-stars.
You have. I was thinking about it. You have been very lucky and they've been very lucky to have you. And finally, you'll like this question, I think. A Star Wars musical or a Marvel musical?
I feel like, narratively speaking, there's more room for a Marvel musical.
Yeah.
And tonally, I think it could work. I mean, when you look at what they did with WandaVision, I mean, I think there's some. Did you watch it by any chance?
I did not.
It was really good. It was good. And what they, again, when good comics properties kind of adhere to what good comics do, which is take an idea and just run with it and write it very well. It lands. I mean, that's why people respond to those Marvel movies, is that they know what they're doing and they're kind of pushing the envelope and in ways that have been done in comics. Like, comics fans recognize what they're doing because they're taking from good comics material. But Star Wars is tricky too. I mean, The Mandalorian is amazing. But I don't know if you could take any of that original material, like the original trilogy, and do it without it being cheesy. It's like there's so many properties, and I won't go into them here, but just watch the movie.
Yeah.
Like, some things like that are imperfect can be improved upon in a musical, but then there are some properties that are perfect. And I would just say, instead of spending $150 on a ticket, just pop in the movie. It's probably streaming.
Which is high praise. I mean, especially, you love musical theater, but you also are, a big Star Wars guy. So, if anyone could say, go watch the movie, it's you.
Just go watch the movie. Star Wars is exactly 2 hours long. I mean, what else do you need to say?
Do you have anything you want to add? Anything you feel I left
Absolutely
out?
not. There are things I'd like to retract, if anything, but I don't have the control. No, I'm just so happy to see you. It's nice to talk to you.
It's so great. And I think you're such a great example of an amazingly successful actor who still does the work and works incredibly hard, and that's why you are where you are, and you're also kind to everyone you work with. And I just want to make sure anybody watching knows that, and I think they could see based on the interview. And just such a proponent of like joy on stage. Like that's what I think of when I think of you.
That's nice. Thanks.
You're welcome. Well, thank you so much. And please stay tuned next week. I think we're coming into a bit of a schedule, so the shows will probably air on Thursdays. More information on that. Check it out on YouTube, like and subscribe. Although we just went on a whole thing about social media being dangerous, but it's YouTube, not social media. So there you go. And hopefully
I do kind of agree.
Enjoy and keep watching. And we have some really exciting guests. And thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.